Today's technical webinar spotlights the Jefferson Institute's project, Maturing ADL in Exercises, or MADLx for short. Our speaker is Dr. Aaron Presnall, president of the Jefferson Institute. Dr. Presnall will be using the next hour to present their project findings and open a conversation with the audience about learning analytics. To respond to a question Dr. Presnall asks, or ask a question of your own, you can click on the questions panel in the GoToWebinar window and type your answer or question there. This webinar will be recorded and distributed to everyone registered following the event. It will also be made available on adlnet.gov and the ADL Initiative social media accounts. If you know anyone else who would like to be added to our distribution list for these webinars, please feel free to have them reach out to us and we can add them to the list. Without further ado, Dr. Presnall, the floor is yours.
Okay. So thank you, Liz, and especially for all the work that you put together in gathering the folks and helping us with the technical stuff on the back end. My name is Aaron Presnall. I'm the president of the Jefferson Institute. We've got here also, I think, Nicholas Lung from Swedish ADL with the Swedish Armed Forces, and Mike Hernandez, who is our technical point of contact at ADL itself. So while I'll be talking mostly, they're around as well if there are questions that their expertise are best suited for along the way. And ideally, we hope to have this as an opportunity to learn as much as we can from you all, as well as you all learning something perhaps from what we're up to along the way. So what is it that we're up to? The MADLx project, it's a BAA grant with ADL, so it's a research and development grant. And the larger, looking at the forest objective is to enhance military training and education by integrating ADL capabilities with joint and coalition training exercises. So it's that operational integration. So again, we are looking to enhance military training and education by integrating ADL capabilities with joint coalition training exercises. Why? That's the subline underneath MADLx itself, is setting the foundations to measure ROI. So we want to get all the value of ADL in exercises in that operational context, not just as pre-training, but fully integrated within the exercise itself, but ultimately so that we can begin to capture answers to that basic question that seems so elusive at times to answer is, did that training do any good? Did the exercise do any good? What did we get from it? And ideally, we can try to begin to use the integration of ADL as a way to capture some of those learning analytics. We will do this by rolling out prototypes through a series of multinational exercises. Each exercise is a kind of milestone along the way for us to rapidly test, evaluate, promote, and discard solutions for the core ADL objectives. So this is an opportunity for us to move beyond just a single instance field test, but really to repeatedly and rapidly test, beat up tools, break them, learn, make them better, try it again. We tried this initially with the Viking 18 exercise about 18 months ago, almost now, and it worked really well and suggested that we've got plenty of headroom for success with this kind of approach. The stakeholders largely that we're going to be working with are training leadership and exercise planners, operators, and participants, obviously, and the observer trainers. Looking through the list quickly of participants here in this webinar, I think we've got actually a pretty good mix of those kinds of stakeholders, but plus a lot of folks from ADL, some nice, it looks like some good representation from industry. Nice representation from Canada especially, but also New Zealand and the UK and France, Sweden, obviously. So we've got a nice international profile here as well. If you don't mind, I'd like to start, before I go too much further, by asking you all a couple quick questions about how this kind of work operates in your field, in your organization. So when I say learning analytics, what I mean really is, think Google Analytics, but for the learning experience. And at the most basic level, historically, we've thought about that as, a score. So the score that you get at the end of a course, or a complete incomplete, that works. But you can think even more sophisticated about all of the little steps, the kind of Google Analytics results that you might get from a learning experience. And you can add in there the data that you might grab from what happens on the job afterwards, or in our case, what happens in the exercise afterwards. So what's the performance after the learning experience look like? So ultimately what you want to try to do is get both that learning data and then the training data and look at them next to each other. Ideally, you would see that learning led to improved performance, not necessarily, but that would be incredibly useful data to put side by side. So first question is, what are you all currently doing in your own organizations with learning analytics? With exercises, perhaps, if you want to be that specific, but like in a line, in your, you can use I think the question box. Just jot down there, and not everyone will see it. I think it'll just be directed to the organizers. What are you currently doing with learning analytics? And I'll give you just a minute quickly to fill that in. My second question is related. Last time I ran this survey, one of the first answers that I got was nothing. Right. So so the second question is, what would you like to be doing? So in that blue sky environment where anything was possible, where you really got what you think should be the way the world looks, what would you like to be doing with learning analytics? We're getting lots of responses.
One person.
That's great. Lots of responses. That's awesome.
We have discovery gaps in learning. We are implementing an evaluation system to collect data about learning, transfer of learning, and organizational results. Making predictions about learner blank. Identify excellence. Support human performance. Answer to the first question, serving our customers better by helping them understand at least basic analytics for courses.
So the last question is, why aren't you doing that thing you wish that you could? What is it that's getting in the way? Is it technology or organizational barriers? You don't have the right partners? What is it that's stopping you from getting that thing that really should happen done? That's especially important for us because, well, we want to know what it is that you want to get done and why you can't, because part of our task is to try to help fix those challenges.
Well, we have no buy-in by decision makers from one person.
Right.
Alignment with business timelines, technology, lack of support/features in third-party platforms, lack of funding, lack of understanding by leadership and others, wants and needs of customers, as well as funding and time. It is still difficult for many us and customers to understand how much can be extracted from learning data, how to begin to ask these questions.
That's all incredibly helpful. As we carry on through the rest of the presentation, please, as new ideas or new answers to those questions arise, drop them in the box. We will collect everything, and it'll become as well a part of the record of the webinar. Not necessarily you can remain anonymous, but that collection of your own feedback on what are you doing, what would you like to be doing, and why aren't you doing that. which is, it's nice to have that by the coffee machine in the break room, but to get it beyond just chatter in the halls, let's really be open and talk about what are the challenges we're all facing out there. So this particular project's outcome target, so talking about what it is that I want specifically, we're looking to support policy development, as you pointed out, in some of the challenges. Some of the challenges is just the policy environment that we're dealing with. We're looking to obviously enhance the exercise user experience, to expand the range of exercise-ready content delivery tools, so beyond just the LMS, moving into mobile, moving into chatbots, all kinds of different ways of delivering learning content. To broaden the availability of demand-driven exercise data and analytics. And there's a little radar graph there, and this that's a cute little example. We'll get into more of that, but demand-driven, I think, is really important, and that connects to one of the other challenges that was observed from the audience. It's difficult sometimes to show the value proposition to leadership or to exercise participants, observers, trainers, on the analytics side, but if we start with the demand-driven side, if we take the time to listen and say what are the questions that they want answered, and begin with that, and then deliver analytics which respond to those kinds of questions, then the demand side, the buy-in becomes a lot easier to work with. And then ultimately to develop content to support awareness and adoption. So what we learn, we want to share, and share in a way that makes it super easy for others to replicate. The analytics dashboard, and this is just a little splash of it, that we used is a key to delivering up the results, and importantly, what we have developed as a analytics tool is a kind of middleware. It's not attached to a particular learning management solution. It's agnostic, standalone, and can take both XAPI and non-XAPI data. As exciting as XAPI is as a data standard, there are all kinds of legacy systems out there delivering all kinds of data, and that's not going to change. We don't want to exclude that data. There's all kinds of really good, rich data out there to draw on in our analytics, and the dashboards that we use have to reflect that. This is the dashboard itself is essentially a proof of concept. It's a prototype. Its purpose is mainly to demonstrate that this is possible, and for those who tell you that it isn't, that they're wrong, that they really have no excuses, that this is something that can be done. So to run through a case study really fast, I thought I'd just walk through the Viking 18 experience. We've done now 2 exercises in a long series that we have planned, but I think the Viking 18 one is a nice compact one that works well. Just as a bit of background, Viking 18, it's a US-Swedish initiative, started up after the 1999 NATO summit. It's a civil military exercise, pulling together both military actors, but also civilians, journalists, town leadership, and police, both international and national actors. Draws together about 50 countries altogether, 35 organizations, and 2,500 participants for about 10 days, and that's a bunch of flags. The risks in rolling out ADL into an exercise like this are abundant. The LMS itself that the Swedes are using for the exercise is not XAPI compliant. The courses that we pulled together from all the different nations to support the exercise were built using all sorts of different standards, including data standards for the analytics. There were multiple national stakeholders and platforms on the exercise management side itself, and so all the different elements of, and this is a CAX, right? So it's a computer-aided exercise. with many layers to it, and each national partner would bring their own piece of the story, a very complex data environment. At the same time, it's a challenging cybersecurity environment. There is a large aggressive neighbor to the east of Sweden, and with all due respect, I don't mean Finland, and it's they are rather aggressive in banging on the door of any high visible exercise like Viking 18, and that creates a real and in fact live cybersecurity environment that has to be dealt with for any kind of online learning experience. And then of course it's limited time frame. There's no delay. You know, if you're not ready for the exercise, then they just skip you. So it's got to be ready and on time. Ready to go, and of course, it's with something like this, it's pretty high visibility. There's lots of flag officers and top politicians involved, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that no one likes to fail in front of people like that. So it's rather intense in terms of getting things right. On the flip side, there's a lot of payoff. As we work with all of these international partners, we can get them to incrementally and increasingly align with DoD 1322.26, which is the basic basic mandates for the U.S. on utilizing ADL. It is, as I mentioned before, it's a kind of hard case proof of concept for XAPI implementation and for learning analytics implementation writ large. If you can do it in this kind of complex environment with all these different legacy systems, if you can include resource-constrained small countries like Bosnia, and they can do it, then really we don't have many excuses ourselves. It does work. And of course, for the bits that don't work, the lessons that we learn, we've got opportunities for quick iteration of next exercise cycles where we can roll out improvements. For some reason, I'm not advancing. There we go. So what did we learn? The technology is ready, right? XAPI can be successfully extracted from hard case non-compliant LMS. Essentially, with this, what we did is rather than trying to beat up the LMS, we modified each of the courses individually. We used the XAPI wrapper, which is an open source tool available on GitHub, built by US ADL, to essentially convert older legacy courses into courses that are now generating XAPI. Okay, limited XAPI, but they can do it. And for our purposes, it's entirely sufficient. I think one of the important lessons here is that some data, while it doesn't meet your grand blue sky vision of everything you'd like to pull out, but some data is more and better than no data. When it comes to learning analytics. When you can get at least the basic stuff out, that's still progress. And importantly, it delivers visualizations that can be used to answer those basic essential questions of especially leadership, and to get them then excited and challenging us back. As they see the visualizations, they begin to ask even more questions. They say, wow, that's really interesting, but could you tell me this and this and that? And that then begins to deliver us our demand signal and to better specify the visualizations for the next cycle. The visualization tools themselves, as I said before, are entirely capable of handling asynchronous data streams from diverse sources, and multiple formats and scales. We took both individual and team data, and we're able to mash it together in intelligible visualizations. I would note as well that it's important, and as we flip back to some of those, the dashboard, you'll see the visualizations are pretty. They've got nice colors, it's nicely designed. That's an important component of making a visualization dashboard work, especially for leadership, but really for anyone, because no one really wants to look at ugly Excel spreadsheet graphs and charts. We've all done way too much of that. We just glaze over. But if a visualization, if you spend a little bit of extra time and resources on making the visualizations pretty, it makes it so much nicer to look at. People linger, and if you can make them playful and slightly interactive even, they'll play with it. We all know that children are much better at learning than adults are. That's not, well, that's partially because they're inherently better at it. A lot of it is because they play. And as adults, we've forgotten how to play. And play is a really essential part of learning. So if you can make your visualizations playful, that's a huge step forward in terms of learning. And then importantly, we can actually do it in a timely manner. We're able to deliver these visualizations and the data essentially real time. So midstream through the exercise, you have both learning and exercise performance data right there in front of you side by side. This is in contrast to the usual story where you get the no learning data and the exercise performance data maybe a month or 6 weeks after the exercise. But we're able to deliver up the performance data live right there immediately for all the different stakeholders. From an operational process perspective, again, we pulled together a variety of different courses, 29 from 6 different sources, from international organizations, NATO ACT, USJKO, Sweden, Slovenia, Bosnia, Macedonia. And what this suggests is that the years and years of efforts at coordination and harmonization of standards is really bringing something. So we can now today pull together course assets from all of these different diverse nations and organizations into something that, okay, they're not perfectly aligned, but we can begin to say there's something like interoperable. With some slight tweaking, all of these different courses can work together. And that, I think, is a huge opportunity for us as we think about course sharing among partnership groups, both at national and multinational levels. From a cybersecurity perspective, just to sort of note, we were quite successful in maintaining both the LRS and the dashboard up live with no intrusions throughout the pre-training and exercise. That was not that they didn't, not that our adversaries didn't try. They tried really hard, but we were able to successfully maintain it. So this, I think, also begins to address some of the challenges that folks put forward for ADL integration into exercises is the cybersecurity side. And I think that while acknowledging that is indeed a real challenge, I think it is one that can be managed and even overcome. Some initial rough thoughts on how we're trying to do things better as we're going forward with next iterations. ADL, as we integrate it from a technical and pedagogical perspective, it also really needs to be considered a part of the exercise itself, not just a complementing sort of add-on, so that we're involved in, fully involved, especially and importantly in the planning team, but in execution and also, and by virtue of the learning analytics and the value that they can deliver in the ExEval as well. I think I've had some of the most interesting and productive conversations with evaluation folks in Sweden with the ExEval teams, where they immediately understand the value of what the learning analytics can deliver and really wish that we had talked to them earlier. And we agree that it would have been really nice if we had talked to them a lot earlier in the planning process for that exercise. They are in many ways the bearers of those core questions that need to be answered by at the end of the exercise. And so if we are in good communication, we can figure out what those questions are early. And make sure we build them into the ADL implementation and the learning analytics dashboard, so that we are collecting data that relates to the ExEval, and we are delivering up visualizations that relates directly to the ExEval. Obviously, in that as I said, communication exchange between all these different teams, an early start to get exercises have their own life cycle. Oftentimes, if you're going to succeed at bringing something new to an exercise, you really need to start a good year ahead of time. And even before that, if you want to factor in the politics of lining up the ducks for the different stakeholders and institutional actors and so on to be ready, it's essential that as you move into an exercise, that it's not, you don't do it as a used car salesman trying to pitch something. It really needs to be demand driven. The folks organizing those exercises have 6,000 flaming balls in the air. They don't need some new fire. You need to come into the picture helping them to put out some of those fires. And so to be able to help them solve their problems is the key. That takes some convincing, because in the beginning you'll just be one more guy dropping in, trying to bring them a new problem. A core ultimately, and this is part of the communication and the organizational alignment, is lining up the learning objectives with the exercise objectives. This is really only achieved through early and regular communication and coordination. The United States is much further along in this, in their own integration of ADL into exercises with aligning learning objectives and exercise objectives. But even there, you may be surprised at how far we still have to go. So looking at milestones forward, we actually just started. So this is still a project that's in very early days. We started with we did Viking 18 last year. The first exercise under this project was CJC, Combined Joint Staff Exercise in Sweden. It's a national version of Viking 18, basically, in May of this year. That was another big success. I think we were very happy with the results there, but it was more or less a replication of Viking. Our next big exercise that we have planned to work with is Aurora in April of 20. That's also in a run out of Sweden. That's a multinational exercise. It's a LiveX as opposed to a CAX. About 20,000 people involved, so lots of data points. But also as a LiveX, there's all kinds of potentially telemetric data and so on that could be really interesting to look at. When you get it at, for example, there's nothing that beats performance results on targeting like the telemetrics of metal on a target. Right? Followed almost immediately after that by BoldQuest. BoldQuest is a more experimentally directed project, or exercise rather, run out of J6 in the United States. That's where they're ready to do more. They're ready to be more aggressive. It's a failure-tolerant environment, let's say, where they encourage really pushing the boundaries, and they're especially looking at helping to make sure that a variety of systems are able to work effectively together. And this is especially important for us as we think about pulling together a variety of very different kinds of data from different sources and using different standards, different time scales, different units of analysis, and delivering it up nevertheless in a way that is timely and meaningful to end users. We have another set of exercises moving beyond, but at this point, those are the ones that we've got locked in. And I appreciate all your time and attention, and I welcome now if either Nicholas or Mike, if you want to say anything quickly, or if we have questions from the audience, then I'm happy to address them.
You did get a kudos to other than XAPI to live on the same space from Mark Grant, but we can wait for a couple minutes while people are typing in their questions in the window.
Okay. Questions are important. I'm much more interested in hearing what it is that you all are interested in, rather than me yammering on about what I think you're interested in. help target me.
Okay, we have a question. Can you please talk more about the learning data you are getting? It sounds like you are going beyond completion data, but I'd like to hear more about how you are measuring learning and performance. That is Krista Rapwani.
Sure. So the learning data is at so far what we've been collecting is relatively blunt, and that's in part because what we're trying to do is a kind of proof of concept water through the pipes at this point, that you really can connect these systems, and partially because what we're trying to do is pull together a bunch of very different and sometimes legacy courses. The XAPI wrapper that we used is what it will do is it'll take your SCORM courses and convert them to be able to generate XAPI data. But essentially what they're doing is they're converting the SCORM statements into XAPI. Right? And SCORM, unfortunately, is limited still to some of that basic old blunt learning performance data. So it means, okay, not just completion, start, stop, score, and completion, of course, right? So that's what we targeted in this case. But I think because we're able to track that across time, we're able to get some additional and interesting results, especially relative to the exercise itself. So you could see not just that students started, stopped, scored, and completed, but you could see them returning to a course, or perhaps taking a course a little too late. We saw them taking so as the exercise progressed and a challenge, for example, on protection of children was inserted into the exercise, maybe folks didn't perform so well on it, you could then see them going back to the course dedicated to protection of children and reviewing that material again before they come back to the exercise the next day. So there were, I think, interesting chronological results that we're able to gather, even using the old sort of blunt results on the learning side. On the performance side, it is for the most part subjective observer-trainer scores. So they gave numerical scores not at the individual level but at the team level across about I'm going to say 60 different exercise objectives. And not every team was subjected to each objective, but some of them were. Some of the objectives were universal, and then each team had a subset of objectives that were specific to them. And so because we knew which individuals were in which teams, we were able to nevertheless normalize the data and to connect to generate some insight on team performance on the learning side relative to team performance on the exercise side.
Okay. Another question we have is, does the XAPI wrapper work with AICC legacy courses?
That's a good question. That's not a course format that we tried, but we found that with some hacking, the XAPI wrapper was pretty good at doing at covering most ground. But I don't know the answer to that question. But if you can make sure to identify yourself, then we could find an answer to the question. Talk to some engineers who maybe have done that, and get you an answer.
Yeah, we'll put you in touch afterwards. The next question is, are there plans to expand the types of XAPI data being collected in future exercises?
Yes, absolutely. So that's in part contingent on what the courses will allow for, but we're dealing with that in a way by, so one of the cookies that we offer to help get ourselves in the door with an exercise is we offer to essentially build the Intro to Crisis course. So that's that scene setting course that the exercise starts with, that every participant has to take. And because we build that course, we can also we can insert all kinds of granularity with the XAPI data. So in the exercises going forward, yes, absolutely, we're going to be moving into much more granularity with the exercise data, because we'll be able to control the development of at least that one core course. We're also going to try to get XAPI data from a variety of other learning delivery platforms. So we're also going to try to get XAPI data from some kind of mobile delivery platform. We're not exactly sure how that's going to work out with Aurora, which one we'll use, but we'll try that. We're thinking about trying to also perhaps use a little bit of a scenario trainer, so a kind of blended learning pre-training tool that the JKO has produced that works really well as a not just a pure online, but a blended pre-training platform. So yeah, we're trying to get both more granularity, but also more variety in terms of the sources of the data. It's not just what the technical platform is, it's what is the student doing when they're capturing the learning content through that kind of platform, right? So it's the student is in a very different place. It's almost a different kind of student when they are using a mobile platform, for example. And to be able to get different results from the students using the mobile tool as they're taking the bus into work for 15 minutes in the morning, as opposed to the online on a weekend, or the blended learning probably on the first day that you arrive on site. Those are very different learning experiences, and to be able to get the different data, to see the differences in the data across those different delivery tools would be really interesting.
Okay, and next question is, have you found that the international community is quicker with adoption / more receptive to DL modernization than the US, or vice versa?
Well, the United States has already, as I said, been relatively open and aggressive with ADL integration into exercises, but predominantly on the pre-training side, as opposed to full operational integration throughout the exercise. So I found actually that with the international and multinational exercises, it's on the full operational integration side, they have been more aggressive. I think part of it is that the multinational exercises tend to be unclass, and so that's just a more permissive environment anyway for experimentation. You can bring a wider variety of actors into the story, and so it just creates a more permissive environment. I think also that because it's a multinational environment, in some ways you're a little bit beyond any particular national way of doing things. And so there may be a little bit more opportunity for creativity because nobody is really quite sure always what the rules are. So you can wiggle things a little bit more easily. There's a little bit more institutional fluidity, if you like. But I think also that on the international side, the multinational side, there's just a really, really strong imperative for doing things better. It's with our defense strategy mandates the 3 pillars. One of them includes partnership, and sometimes in the United States we're not as good at recognizing that as an equal 3rd pillar, but I assure you, internationally they do. They take partnership very, very seriously, and they want to push that as far as they can. It's not an abstract, political wouldn't it be nice kind of thing. This is a defense capability. It really matters, and so they push that as hard and aggressively as lethality and business effectiveness. And so I think that push on partnership also creates an environment where they are eager to aggressively move into experimental work with the United States in ADL as well. I just note also, just in passing, ADL has done a great deal of work over the years in building up global networks for both for research and development with ADL, but then also standards and distributing those standards globally across our partners. The ADL global network is a kind of core group of especially NATO allies, but also non-NATO and Pacific nations. The NATO itself, NATO ACT is here in the room, and they do a great job providing to partnership leadership, especially through the PFPC partner nations just outside of NATO. NATO itself on standards is really aggressive with the NATO training group, task group on individual training and education, which basically owns the NATO standards on ADL. They've themselves been quite aggressive and open to adopting new standards, including sort of pulling in XAPI and other. And so across the board, there's a really good international, multinational infrastructure available for experimentation and dissemination of on the successes of those experiments, the new standards that we develop, and that so it's a really fertile environment.
All right. I think we technically have 15 more minutes, so questions keep on coming in. Next question is, what open collaboration opportunity is possible for us?
Well, we're always looking for good exercises to work with. So if you are associated with or know of an exercise that would be a good fit for some collaborative work, then we're very eager to talk to you. We've got all kinds of resources to bring to the story, and like I said, our objective is to make the life of an exercise planner easier and better. We don't want to bring new trouble, so we really understand how complex these things are, and we want to be part of the solution. So if you've got an exercise where we can help, then that would be great. If you've got a tool that you'd like to test in an exercise, I mean, in a way, what we offer is a kind of pathway to test and potentially highlight some new tools or new approaches for data visualization, or new if you've got a learning analytics question that you would like to push through an exercise there too. Like, think of us as you know, a potentially a big survey research operation that runs on a pretty much quarterly basis, runs surveys out in the field, and if you want to add a question or two, then we can talk about that. The data, like I said, with Aurora, for example, the data set on 20,000 participants in a LiveX across, I think 10, 12 days of an exercise, that's a lot of data. That could potentially be a really interesting opportunity for folks who have questions to throw into the basket. And then, beyond that, I am almost certain that you all can imagine collaboration opportunities that I can't. So don't let my vision restrict the scope of the possible. Let us know, and let's sit down and brainstorm together.
Okay, and the last question that we have in the queue right now is there any visual information that you can provide to display how this method can be used to provide course instruction, be that in school or via distance learning?
Visual information. So I guess that's part of what this webinar is beginning to do. So like I said, we're in a very early stage in the project. So we don't, I think we will soon have the project website up. This webinar is another component of it. We have, I'm proud to say, IFEST is the annual conference that ADL puts on. And for the last 2 years running, we have won the People's Choice Award for the best poster at iFest connected to this project. So we've got a couple really cool posters that we can throw up on that website as well, which help to explain the project in a single colorful page. So yes, we're definitely, we're just a little over, I guess, 8 months into this project. Well, not even that, 6, 7 months into this project, because we got a little bit of a late start. So we have a lot of visual content, one pagers, and so on, and all of that is coming to a web page near you soon, in the next, I think probably just week or two, and I'm sure that it can be distributed to this list along with the webinar, the recorded webinar, and all the rest.
Absolutely. Yep, we can help you with that. Okay. I don't see any more questions. So last call. Anybody has any more? Do you have any final words of wisdom?
No, I would just again repeat that this is entirely doable. It is not easy, but the technology really can plug together. The technology exists. The main issue is not so much technical, really. I mean, it's a challenge. It's hard. It is not free. But the main challenge, really, honestly, is human. It's about getting the institutions and individuals together on the same page, and that's time consuming. But what we're trying to do as well is to shortcut that a little bit by providing some demonstration examples of how cool it is when it all fits together, and to maybe help to inspire others through those examples, through the standards that we help to support development of, through the content that we develop to help spread the lessons that we learn, through one-pagers, posters, websites, webinars, and other materials to really spread the goodness, and the exercises themselves. If you can start in a really small way, in a small classroom-sized exercise, just as an experiment, just to get some data together and throw it up on a dashboard. I think what we found is that if you can do that and then show the immediate results to leadership, they're smart enough. They understand and can immediately grasp the value of that fast turnaround on even basic analytics. And like I said, it sparks that demand signal. And I think that's really the key is to get the leadership on board, and once they're excited to get, again, that simple question that we can't seem to answer: did this training do any good? We don't have to answer it if we can begin to approach answering it. I think we've delivered significant value, and leadership will immediately see that. Even if you start on a super small scale, just get started, try, and call on us. We're happy to help you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Presnell. That was a wonderful session. We got some great questions, and we appreciate you taking the time to share your perspectives. Just as a reminder, this, for anyone still listening in the room, this session was recorded, and a link to the recording will be distributed before the end of the day to anyone who is registered. So if your buddy couldn't make it, they're still going to get the video in their email. And later it will be uploaded to YouTube and adlnet.gov and the ADL Initiative social media pages. One last plug before we depart. Next week on the 25th, we'll be dropping a pre-recorded webcast as opposed to a live webinar, featuring Commander Geir Isaacson, head of R&D at the Norwegian Defense ADL office. He'll be showing us the But Will It Work Online series, which dives into how they're helping teachers and instructors bring their courses online at the Norwegian Defense University College. So if you'd like to get that webcast delivered directly to your inbox, you can follow the link I'm about to drop in the questions window and opt in for it. There's the link. And that was my last plug. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you one more time to Dr. Presnell And thank you to everybody else for joining us today. And I
You're
hope
very,
you all have a great day.
you're very welcome. I would just confirm that Gears stuff is awesome, and it involves puppets, so it's a lot of
Yes,
fun. You really enjoy it.
it is. Yes.
All right.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. Have a good day, everybody.